Bob Powell, you might want to unmute yourself.
Thanks.
Thank you. So, in terms of members present, we have Justin, Rich, Bob, Vera, Tom, and myself. Ed, have you logged on? Those would be the voting members for this evening. I'm not going to seat any other member in Ed's absence because Ed would be the only qualified member to vote on the issue at hand tonight if we conclude our vote. So next up, any additions or changes to the agenda, Paula?
He's muted.
I just remembered that. No changes.
Okay. The minutes of July 11th, 2022, any corrections or changes? I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes and approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second it.
Just, I'll second.
Okay,
I believe Tom was first.
okay. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? We'll call that unanimous. Audience of citizens, is there anything anyone would like to bring up to us? Okay, first up, we're going to go into unfinished business. Item 6.1, Valley Street Investments. Greg Glaud and Norman Tebow Jr. Application for a wedding event facility at 79 Cards Mill Road, map 20, lot 16, per section 52.7.5. So to the commission members, this is something that we've, let me make note that Ed has joined the meeting. I'm going to wait for him to connect. Ed, could you unmute yourself? Ed Madrak? So we are just going into the discussion under item 6, unfinished business, the Valley Street investment application that we've closed the public hearing on. And we have discussed this, and this is where I'd like to finish our discussion as a commission and likely get an idea which direction we're going, and then make a motion in that direction and then vote on that motion. Would anyone from the commission like to speak? Just for the record, I want to make sure everybody who's a voting member this evening has listened to, if you weren't present, has listened to the recording for the public hearings, each of the public hearing, and the last meeting if you were not present. If you missed any of those, I would ask you to recuse yourself for the meeting, for the voting on this.
Rick, I'm sorry, I reviewed everything in its entirety, so
Okay.
I want to state for the record.
All right,
And Ed?
Yeah, I did mine today.
Okay.
okay, thank you very much. So as far as this application goes, we took an informal poll on people's perspective at the last meeting. I won't go through what each person thought, you know, you can speak for yourselves. But there was a lot of really well thought out testimony. It was a well thought out presentation from the applicant, and we got a lot of really good testimony from the public. I've taken so much of the public's testimony so seriously as I've taken the application from the applicant. I really appreciate the quality of the work our staff did, and Rich Roberts, our counsel, has been invaluable in making sure that we frame our understanding of the regulations. Understand that we're voting on an application for a specific use under a special permit section of our regulations. We're voting for a use of the land by, not by an applicant, but a vote in either in favor or not in favor of a use of the land in that way. Has literally nothing to do with the individual that, or the entity that is making that application, because if we grant that approval now runs with the land. It's an approval that has to survive whomever might or might not receive approval, and would be ongoing with the land until that use is actively discontinued. Or actually, that's not accurate, Rich, if you want to weigh in. So this is not a grandfathered use, it's a special permitted use, and that absent any restrictions on the length of time, which we're not really empowered by our regulations, this is a permanent approval for the parcel of land. So I want to frame that. So I want to take very seriously our deliberation about the parcel. And I've come to a perspective on this, a very strong perspective. And I would encourage, would we like to go back through all the members? I'll weigh in last if you don't mind. And if anyone wants me to do it, who's on the commission to speak first, I would, about my perspective. But if you could go back over your perspective on it, and I'll get a perspective on where the commission is heading on either approval or denial of this permit. And if it's approval, is it with conditions? We do have a sample motion that we have available that we could use as a reference. Let me, Joshua and or Paula, just for the record, the last version of the plans were dated 6/23/2022, correct?
Correct.
And the description of the plan would just be the site plan prepared for Valley Street Investments LLC.
The label on it is Valley Street Investments, LLC, 79 Cards Mill Road, Columbia, Connecticut. I was under the assumption that there would be some modifications to the draft that the town attorney prepared. So either he or I can on the fly insert the changes, take out deletions, add lines if there's anything.
Okay. That said, if you don't mind, I'll just go through a list of commission members in the order I happen to have written them down. And if you could just state what your perspective is, and then based on what the majority view of the commission is, then I'll suggest we put forth the draft motion in that direction. Justin?
Yeah, my position has not changed since last meeting. I feel the applicant has met or exceeded the requirements through the regulatory structure to have their application approved. And I've come to that decision strictly through the review of the material during these meetings and in the public hearing, and any of the written regulations that we have to go by. My position has not changed, and I would be inclined to approve the application speedily.
Okay.
Thank you.
Rich Napolitano?
I, like Justin, feel that the applicant met all the criteria that we set in our regulations for the special permit. I based my decision on all the information that was provided during our meetings, materials, testimonies. I haven't changed, so that's where I stand.
Okay. Bob?
Yes, thank you. I feel that the applicant has a negative impact on the quality of life of the neighborhood due to the traffic that upon entering is about 80% more than is usual on that road, and at exiting is about 146% more than as on that road, and I feel that has an adverse effect on the quality of the neighborhood. I also feel that the noise that will be emanating from this facility, as the applicant's expert witness stated, should not be less than 30 decibels. our regulations require music shall not be audible beyond the property line. So discrepancy there. I also feel that the flood zone discrepancy of information from Tolland County, which is dated 1982 versus New London County, which is dated 2011, raises questions that were not adequately answered by the applicant. So I'm likely to vote not to accept this application.
Okay. Thank you very much. Vera?
Where's Vera?
Vera's got a-
Vera, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Now we
I
can.
can hear you now.
Okay. I started out by saying, since our last meeting, I did go through the minutes. I did go through the reason for approval or denial under our subsections. I also had an opportunity to go traveling through that area on the road several times, and I purposely took different type of vehicles. I've been down there with a pickup, fairly new pickup. I've been on the road, Carts Mill, with a minivan, trying to, see if there's any different perspective that I could have other than the one I had. And I found relatively no change other than pretty much what I had mentioned before of concern. Like I said, I've been on the roads, all surrounding different ways to approach the proposed facility with different type of vehicles. And it's all tight. I had barely had any room with a minivan. The truck was worse. I'm still concerned on the same points that I made before. I am concerned about the traffic because I could not fit through there. I was on with a minivan, which is a fairly small vehicle. I was on the yellow line and with no shoulder. The noise is a concern to me for the neighbors. I'm concerned about the impact on both what they're able to do on their weekends when most people can enjoy what they work for all week financially. Also concerned about what their property values, if it's going to have a negative or positive impact. You're not sure, although I would consider it a negative impact. I don't think that's a fair way to treat the people who have already been members of our community and, taxpayers as far down even as Scalise Drive. I mean, that's a little ways down further, but these people are going to be impacted. And I believe it's going to be a negative impact due to noise. I also think it's an impact. It's an impact when anybody gathers as a group. Let's face it, noise travels, voices travel, music travels, all those things. Without a guarantee of, it not, I think, well, the decimal thing and whether or not it's going to, beyond the reach, you're still going to have noise. It's still going to be later in the evening for the neighbors. And I really think that's a big issue of trying to put this commercial type venue in such a tight neighborhood. I just really have tried back and forth to figure out how this would fit. And I just haven't been able to come up with a way that it would fit. So I would be, like I said in the previous meeting, I would be inclined to vote no.
Okay, thank you very much. Tom?
Hi, everybody. I've given this a great deal of thought, as all of us have, and I just have a real problem with the noise, and I have a problem with the traffic is probably my larger concern. And I really have not been able to come to grips with a commercial enterprise in a residential agricultural zone. I cannot wrap my head around that, and it's ironic because in my travels today, I happen to drive by the entrance to the one in Hampton. And it is such a different approach coming off of Route 6 than what we will have here in town. So I will be inclined to vote no.
Okay, thank you. Ed, your perspective.
I'm gonna vote yes.
Okay. That's sufficient, but if you'd like to elaborate.
Well, it's the same things. It's, I feel that they met all the requirements, but my only hiccup is how narrow the roads are there. And if it becomes a problem, then I think something would have to get addressed by the applicant. But otherwise, I mean, they have everything in their order in the right way. It's just, my concern is how narrow the road is. And if there is a problem, can they address that issue without having the town involved and everybody else involved?
Okay, I hear what you say. So next
Can
up,
can I add one more thing that I forgot?
sure.
The thing I want to add is that what happens if these conditions are not adhered to? I guess I'm not sure how they would be addressed, who they would be addressed to, and how they would be resolved. And I do have an issue with that too.
I hear you. Okay, so last up would be myself. I'm inclined to vote not to approve the application for two very specific reasons. I do have a similar concern about enforcement that you allude to, but that isn't an evaluation criteria that we have to utilize to evaluate this. But there are two very specific things. I feel the road is too narrow to support the traffic at its peak as it enters and exits. I'm very concerned. Partially the narrowness, but also the nature of the roads for an extended period of time as you have to travel them to get from any main state highways or high volume state roads, high volume town roads. The other thing is, I don't feel that the sound engineer did a sufficient job of documenting the specific aspect of the regulation that says that music will not be audible at the property boundary. He talked about decibel levels, but not about, he would not take the stance that the music could not be heard. And if anyone interprets it that way, that is not what I heard from that person. And I was very specific in trying to get that information because that's a legal requirement we have in our regulations. And I don't feel that there was adequate documentation of that. But that alone would have caused me to not vote in favor of this application. But one other thing that we may not be able to do anything about is its exact proximity on maybe one of the most quiet streets and the least accessible streets in town. And that's the basis for our special permit process, is to utilize subjective criteria, somewhat subjective criteria along very rigid boundaries to evaluate an application that just can't just meet a list of requirements that are very objective and very specific. So I would be inclined to not approve the application. I think the application was extremely well presented and it's well thought out, but the lack of documentation about information about the music, and I know that the applicant went to great lengths to try and design to be compliant with our regulations, but lacking the kind of definitive statement from the sound engineer was one part of it. But again, bottom line is we have one of the most narrow roads in town with stone outcroppings. I mean, I've driven that road many, many times. I'm very aware of the property as it sits and the current entry to the property and then the proposed entry. It's just probably the least likely place to have this kind of venue under our regulations. We're not specific about it needing to be on a main state road or a very high traffic thoroughfare within town. But this road is not a good fit for this proposed use. So I would be inclined to vote no, and that would lead us to having 4 to vote no and 3 to vote yes on when we take a vote for the commission. So I would propose that we use the draft of the motion to deny the application. If you've read through it and want to add any other statements, I think that the application the motion to deny this is very well crafted. We would need to fill in the blanks about the plan dates and the name of the plan as it was supplied to us. And I'd be happy to read that motion or make that motion if you're so inclined. If anyone else would rather do it, I'd leave it to you to do. Everyone comfortable with moving forward to take a vote?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Mhm.
I'm going to ask a question of both our council, but more importantly, our planner. Do you think that there's any modifications of the motion that we've crafted? We did craft motions going each way because I think until this evening, nobody had an idea whether we would go toward an approval or a denial of this motion. I don't see any modifications needed in the proposed in the draft motion. Paula, any thoughts on that?
I concur. I reviewed it several times before I forwarded it to you because Richard sent it to me so that I could see if there were any errors or omissions.
Okay.
And it seemed fine with me.
So I'll read this out loud, and the name of the plan would just be Valley Street Investments LLC, 79 Cards Mill Road, Columbia, Connecticut.
Correct.
Okay. So the motion I will make is this: for the reasons set forth below and based solely on the testimony, documentation, and other evidence provided during public hearings held on May 9th, 2022, May 23, 2022, June 13th, 2022, and June 27th, 2022. The Columbia Planning and Zoning Commission does hereby deny PZC 2122-06 Valley Street Investments, Greg Glaud and Norman Tebow Jr. application for a wedding event facility at 79 Cards Mill Road, map 20, lot 16, per section 52.7.5 of the Columbia zoning regulations, as more particularly set forth in the statement of use dated June 27th, 22, and shown on plans dated June 23rd, 22, entitled Valley Street Investments LLC, 79 Cards Mill Road, Columbia, Connecticut. The applicant has not satisfied each of the requirements of section 51.3 of the site plan section of the zoning regulations. Specifically, the proposed commercial use is not compatible with the existing and probable future character of the neighborhood and the residential uses therein. Traffic load. Problematic due to narrow roadways, significant rock outcroppings, and the potential for accidents on the part of the guests unfamiliar with the area attempting to locate the site or to leave the site at night. Next, 1 or 2 of the possible routes to reach the site from state highways are very narrow and potentially hazardous. Next, the conflicting FEMA flood elevation mapping between Tolland and New London County, as well as testimony during the public hearing, indicates that a substantial portion of the area proposed for development is in a location susceptible to flooding. The applicant has not satisfied each of the requirements of section 52.4 of the special permit section of the zoning regulations. Specifically, the proposed use is inconsistent with the provision of the town's current plan of conservation and development. The proposed use as a commercial event facility is not in harmony with the appropriate and orderly development of the area in which it is located. Width, grade, alignment, and sight lines on the roadways accessing the property from the various state highways are not adequate or appropriate for the volume of anticipated traffic. The nature and intensity of the proposed use is not suitable and will have an adverse impact on the neighboring properties and residences. The permit has not satisfied each of the requirements of section 52.7.5 of the special permit regulations governing event wedding venue facilities. Specifically, low-level background music outdoors at the ceremony would likely be audible at the property line at the 10-mile river. Testimony from the applicant sound expert did not state definitively that music from inside the building would not be audible at the property line. Noise from guests entering and leaving the facility would likely be audible at the property line. The applicant's traffic study was insufficient to allow the commission to conclude that safe travel is ensured between the proposed facility and all state highways likely to be used to access the facility in light of substantial public testimony to the contrary. Any comments on that? If none, do I have a second? Bob Powell, seconds that. Any discussion?
Voting members, please unmute yourselves.
Any discussion from commission members? With that said, all in favor of this denial, please raise your hand or say aye.
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 That would be Vera, myself, Tom, and Bob voting against. And then those not in favor of denying this application would be Rich, Ed, and Justin. Thank you, everybody. I want to thank the applicant for valiant effort. I want to thank the public for bringing a lot of pertinent information into our realm so that we could do a very thorough evaluation of this. And that's it on this topic. Bear with me. Next up is under new business. We have item 7.1, the discussion, Marnie Kagerer, special permit application for dog grooming and dog daycare at 65 Route 6, map 5, lot 2 per section 31.3.8, and set a public hearing date for this.
I would suggest August 22nd.
Okay,
Rick, I had a question on this, Paula, when you're done. I'm sorry.
on this application?
Yes.
Sure. Why don't you? Well, let's set the public hearing date. Everyone good with August 22nd?
Yes.
Okay,
Fine.
so we'll set the, I'll make a motion that we set the public hearing date for this application for August 22nd, 2022 at 7 p.m. And that will be a virtual meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll
I'll
second.
second it.
That sounded like Vera.
Yep.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Okay. Okay, against, abstentions? Can't really vote against it, so. Justin, are you abstaining?
Yes.
Okay, so you had a question about this?
Yeah, I need some clarity on this. So I read through the special permit application. It seems pretty straightforward for a common use business in a commercial district. Can someone explain to me why they would have to have a special permit for this?
It's in
That's
our it's in our regulations that where we list how a new use for a particular building can be approved. And dog grooming and dog daycare is something that requires a special permit to establish it for the first time in a new location. And the commission did that. And it's been that way for as long as I've seen it. So at least the last 20 years or so. My computer is asking me to reboot itself. Please don't do that. Okay, I think I'm set. And it's partially because the attendees to a dog grooming, doggy daycare can be now noisy at times. And there's been experience that the town has had over
We
the
don't,
years.
I don't think we need to get into the whys of it, Paula.
Okay,
I think
all
the
right.
idea that it is specifically a special permit required to establish that type of business use, even in a commercial zone. It's, if you know, Justin, I'd be happy to go over those with you too, if you're curious about where it appears in the regulations.
Yeah, and we can take this offline. I disagree with the fact that they would even need to have to apply for a special permit to put a
Well-
common use business and listen, I'm not here to argue with you, Rick. I understand that things probably
No,
are the way
I
that they
haven't
are,
looked
but
at, I haven't verified anything myself either. I go based on Paula's awareness of it.
because my concern is that someone comes in front of the town and says, I want to have a common use business in a commercial zone, and we automatically say, you need a special permit application. So I'm trying to figure out what is uncommon about the business and uncommon about the zone, because in this
Well,
case, why even have a
this is
commercial
probably
zone?
not the time to talk about it. Let's talk about it offline. The reason I say that is the simple issue here is whether we in our regulations require a doggy grooming business to need a special permit. If it is, it is. If you don't think that should be in our regulations, that would be a separate discussion for a separate time.
So any business that currently isn't established within the
I don't think
town
that's
needs a
what
special.
Paula said.
Not what he's saying.
No, not what he,
No.
that's not what's being said whatsoever. There are certain specific uses of property that we require a special permit because we want a higher level of review. And so without me reading through the regulations, because I can't remember every last regulation, I can't comment on that. So if you read through the regulations and you feel that our regulations specifically don't mandate the need for a special permit, then let's address that. But I think the key is to review the regulations and understand precisely what's in there.
You look at the
I
table.
understand, Rick, and
If you look at the table under section 31, it's listed under 3.8 as being required to establish a dog grooming business or dog daycare business in the commercial zone.
okay, I understand. I'll leave it there. I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but I think that that's something that we should review. We talked,
Yeah,
many
but
of us,
this is not
regardless
the time to
of.
do it.
No,
Under
no, I
the
understand, Rick.
application, it is required. If you think we should change the
I-
regs, then we'll bring that up and we'll have a discussion about it.
Well, I'm saying, again, I'll do the research, and I think that we should on the face of it, but my concern is that the applicant is going to be, this is going to take time and money already for something that necessarily they shouldn't necessarily have to go through. That's my only concern. So I think we should take it offline or in a more appropriate forum, but it's something that
Okay.
I'd like to see us have a further discussion about.
Okay, so we've set the public hearing date. And we're going to pass over subdivision regulations. We haven't had a subcommittee meeting. Justin and myself and Paula have been working on that, and we will continue to work on that. We'll set up a time for our next meeting. Not under communications and reports, I have no further information about the enforcement report spreadsheet that we've received in the past. I just haven't been able to circle back to our zoning enforcement officer, and I've received no additional information. And that would lead us to anything else under communication and reports, Paula?
Nothing for me.
Okay. anything open discussion, what you bring up, Justin, being an open discussion, it's quite appropriate if you have a concern about it. So the point is that I would make to you is if it's in our regulations and you don't think it should be, that starts a new discussion. And
I'll do that I'll do that at the appropriate time. My concern, Rick, is that the applicant has already had to start the process for something that I think most people just aren't attentive to. I just don't, we talk, and this crosses political parties, and that's what I love about this group. We constantly talk about having an easy process for businesses. And here you have Route 6. This business is going to be surrounded by the transfer station, there's a body shop down the road, there's the public works. Like, this is not a residential area. And to have something that's in common use like this, a common use business, there's thousands of them across the country, for them to have to run through hoops for a special application permit, that's not easy to work with. So I think before it even got to this point, I would have rather had us review that and had a discussion about it. And that's my only concern. I think, and listen, if I'm the crazy one in the room who only thinks that, then I will keep my mouth shut. But
I share
I'm
your
concerned
same
about it.
desire
I don't
to
think,
make
I don't
it
think we're
easy.
going, I just want to say something for a second. I don't have any choice to put my hand up other than to jump in. I think it's just because that is the way the regulation is written at the moment, and that's what we have to abide by. I think what Rick is trying to explain, if somebody thought that this was totally unreasonable and to put it on the agenda, and if we go, when you do through regulations, I mean, constant, redoing regulations. And if we have a bunch of those that we want to revisit and we want to redo or rewrite or anything, then that's the time. If the applicant has gone this far to want to do this and made the application with knowing that this takes a special permit and has made the application, then you have to give them their day according to what our regulations state as they are. And I think that's what Rick's trying to explain.
No, and I understand that. I think that that's reasonable. But the problem is that Marnie Kagerer is the one who's having to, deal with the situation as is, because this is a reasonable thing. This person should be able to do this in a commercial zone, or we shouldn't have a commercial zone. So they're going to forced to go through this process because they don't know. And I was ignorant to it until I saw I haven't I don't memorize word for word every piece of the zoning regulation. So when something like this is brought in front of us, I think it's a great time before we force the person to spend money and time, because we know how long these things take, to maybe review it if it's reasonable.
I see where you're going, and I probably have sentiments very similar to yours, Justin. We're always encountering things that we see that are in the regulations and say, this doesn't need to be here. Let's address those things. But the point here is that this came likely, if I recollect when we enacted this, we had on more than one occasion a doggy grooming business that had been located in a residential area. And there is a key difference there. That became extremely problematic. I mean, murderously problematic for the neighbors. And so why it got lopped in there, I can't tell you the rationale. I just don't recollect it. I don't know that it wasn't always that way since I've been on planning and zoning. But the idea that a commercial zone maybe doesn't need it, valid thing. But the other thing, the applicant could always have said, I don't want to go through the special permit process. I'll go talk to the commission and ask them to repeal this regulation because I don't think it's necessary in our town. That could have been done. And they don't have to propose it and pay for a regulation change. They come to us, our minds are open, our hearts are open. We do want to help. We've had people many times come to us and propose a regulation change, and we just do it. Makes sense.
And we put it on the commission's list so that they did not have to pay for the change, and put it on our backs to get the work done so that it would be a little bit smoother for them to get what they're asking for.
So what you're saying is
Listen,
great.
Rick, I'm all for regulation change. I think that we should go through this with a fine tooth comb and constantly be looking for things that don't make sense and updating them. I think we should do that on a constant basis. But we know how this works. An applicant who wants to have a business in town, or anybody who wants to do something, is going to try their best to follow the rules as written. They're not going to question things because they don't want their application denied.
Oh,
I know that's kind of a separate, I know that's
Justin,
the
they-
feeling that people
they-
have.
They approached me to find out what they needed to do, and I looked into the zoning regulations, and this is what they need to do for their zoning rules, for their zoning to be approved. She was fine with that. And there are residences nearby. Across the street is several residences. And that's the way our commercial district is. We have an awful lot of residential homes intermixed with our commercial.
Justin, I'm just going to not agree with you that there's any potential that we as a commission would react negatively to somebody coming in and saying, I don't think you really need a special permit in a commercial zone for a doggy daycare. We'd appreciate
That's not what
the
I'm saying,
input.
Rick.
Well, that's
That's
what
not what I'm saying.
what I thought I heard from you.
Well, no, let me be more precise. What I'm saying is that if someone reads the rules as they are and they want to have a business in town, they're most likely, because I've been through this in other places, are going to feel that they should follow the rules in order to get what they want done. Now, if they're going into this and they question it because they for whatever reason they want to question it, sure, I totally agree with you. I think that I think more people should be involved. We've got a lot of people on here today. More people should speak up and look through the regulations and find things they don't think make sense and bring them to us. But a person in the midst of trying to start a business is a little bit different, in my opinion. So listen, I'm not saying this to create an argument. And I don't know all of the details behind the application up to this point. I just feel that they shouldn't have to do that. And if this is an opportunity for us to address something to make it easier for someone to open up a business in a commercial zone, then I think that we should do this before requiring that person to spend the money and time in getting this done. Because whether we put a pause on it and try to fix this problem as I see it in the regulation, or we go through with a special application permit, there's time either way. It's going to take time. So I would rather fix
one
the
option that we
originating
don't
problem.
have is to say we don't like our regulation anymore. We're going to ignore it this time. That's illegal.
No, I'm not.
We're not
That's
allowed
what
to
I'm
do that.
saying. No, that's not what I'm saying.
Justin, if this moves,
And we can't change the regulation at this point because the applicant has submitted something under the existing regulations. So if we change the regulations, the old regulations would adhere to this application.
So worst case scenario, here's my opinion. If it has to go through in the current way, then it goes through. We do what we need to do. But this is something that we need to learn from and address for the future, because this is not friendly to a no-brainer business that should be allowed without all of these firewalls put in front of them to be able just to go through the process. I don't agree with it, but it is what it is. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
and you had talked about the lengthy process, she most likely would be approved on August 22nd.
Of course she would, because it's such a no-brainer to approve it.
Okay.
That's just an opinion.
Is anyone else on the commission like to say anything about this? Or can we move on?
Let's move on.
Okay. I don't think we need to go into executive session. There's
We've got
nothing.
audience of citizens.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Audience of citizens, anything anyone from the public would like to bring up to us?
Mr. Kabala has his hand up.
Mr. Kabala, how are you?
And
Yes, I'm trying to unmute it.
You're
Can
on
can you hear me?
You did a great job. Happy
Great.
summer.
Yeah, I've got two items with this last, the wedding venue that you people just approved, or disapproved it, I'm sorry, disapproved it. You're talking about the traffic, and one of the main things was the traffic on the road seemed to be very problematic. Well, the way I see it is, driving on a lot of these roads for numerous years, I find that it's usually the citizens in the area who are the drivers that you have to be worried about. The drivers that are going to come out of this venue is going to be so minimal that I see it as being nothing to do with any approval or disapproval of this application. The other issue that thing I'd like to talk about is the noise. Talking, listening to noise. Noise is a funny thing. I'm sure that if you go into that neighborhood, you probably got barking dogs barking all the time from many different areas. The worst thing I could think of is barking dogs. As far as a little bit of music coming out of this thing, and I have to stress, probably just a little bit of music. I rather listen to that music than barking dogs. As music goes, we had wedding venues up here by Rec Field. A person used to run them for years, would be weddings. And I would hear their music, not loud, but I would hear it. And I enjoyed it more
I
so
understand.
than
Mr.
I
Kabala, we've already made the
listening to these
decision on this
dogs barking
application.
there all the time.
Mr. Kabala,
Yes,
I respect, there was ample time to testify during the public hearing on this. And I would appreciate it if we could just move on from this right now, because this has already been decided. This is a non-issue now.
yes. And I'm talking about what I've seen as being a snarky type of a vote on this issue.
Well, I don't appreciate anything that this commission does being described as snarky. So I'm going to move on.
I said it. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. I'm going to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Is there no one else that want to speak?
I wasn't aware of it. If I missed anyone, let's circle
Mrs.
back.
Kabala would like to speak. Mrs. Kabala would like to speak.
Okay, Mrs. Kabala.
Carol Kabala.
Hi, Carol.
37
Hi, Carol.
Hi, thank you. Hi. 37 Lake Road, Columbia. What I would like to know is, seeing that you did disapprove this venue, is there recourse for the people that want to get this done? Did they come back to you now or not?
Well, that's a complex discussion. I'd suggest you
Okay.
put a call into Paula Stahl, our town planner. She could
Okay.
explain that to you in more depth.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll
Josh,
second.
Vera, did you second that?
Yes, I did.
Okay, all those in favor? That
Aye.
looks unanimous. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone who attended. I
Thank-
appreciate it.
Can you stop the recording?
Thank you.
please?
Good night.
Good night.